parameters that go into assessing this is, I think the first thing one looks at is it in a zone where there's not been too much activity in terms of earthquakes, floods, and so on. Is there some amount of political stability in that location? What is the overall history in terms of rioting and so on? Because what happens is, in a data center, when there is a failure of any component, it's extremely important to reach that component, replace it in the minimum possible time to ensure that the availability is never compromised. So those aspects are extremely important. First step in determining the viability of a site is to go by the prevalent standards that are defined for data centers internationally and the availability one designs them for. So there are close to about 200 parameters available within multiple standards, and we look at assessing the site's readiness for a data center build based on those parameters. So what we do is help the client arrive upon a decision as to what is their realistic requirement for availability. From that, we derive an aspirational tier level for the data center, and then we take the specifications for that tier level and see how well is the site identified, aligning with the tier level requirements. So there are things such as distance from water bodies, accessibility of roads, past seismic activity, proximity to, let's say, vendor supplies for spares and so on. So we have a matrix of about 50 parameters. We use that to actually do a site selection and help the client determine whether the site lends itself to a data center build or not. The other very big factor which goes into selecting a site wisely is the availability of the required quantum of power. Now, data centers are power guzzlers. Their consumption runs into megawatts, and if you look at a 10-year lifespan or a 15-year lifespan or a 20-year lifespan of the data center, it's very important to have that end state power quantum available, usually upfront, at least as a commitment from the local government and electricity boards. That's another significant factor. Not very many clients look at greenfield projects as their preferred way to build a data center unless it's of a very large scale. So if it is a medium-sized data center, it's very important for us to go ahead and assess the shell and the structure, or the base building as it's called, for compliance to the tier standards as well. And that starts from the structural strength of the building to the ability to, let's say, place a diesel generator with so many hours of diesel available as backup on standby. Some geographies where you will find most companies situating their data center, and there are some preferred geographies for the DR site as well, which needs to be a certain distance from the data center. So usually the parameters that go into assessing this is, I think the first thing one looks at is it in a zone where there's not been too much activity in terms of earthquakes, floods, and so on. Is there some amount of political stability in that location? What is the overall history in terms of rioting and so on? Because what happens is, in a data center, when there is a failure of any component, it's extremely important to reach that component, replace it in the minimum possible time to ensure that the availability is never compromised. So those aspects are extremely important. So you will find a lot of data centers are located in the state of Maharashtra. There are a few banking data centers in Navi Mumbai. A lot of new data centers are coming up in Pune, definitely. The DR sites somehow have been more towards the south. So there's been Chennai, Hyderabad, occasionally Bangalore that are liked. Many companies are now looking at data center builds in these three locations as well. Delhi, I think there are a few data centers, mostly from the telcos, but they are a part of a larger footprint. So if they have 15 data centers there are a few there. Increasingly, I find interest in places like Jaipur for building data centers. Gurgaon definitely remains one. Leadership in energy and environment design, and it's a program that originated from the US Green Building Council, and the representation in India is through the Indian Green Building Council. Now, what this program does is look at various aspects of a building, starting with the site to indoor air quality to the use of energy, whether there's been any impact on the greenery within that facility, so on, any innovation related to things that help either use energy better or ensure the greenness of the building. Now, there are multiple factors that go into it, and there's a pointing system based on which building that has registered itself as desirous of LEED can be either certified silver, gold or platinum. Now, this LEED, for example, for new construction, is specific for generic buildings. It's not specialized for data centers. But there are, I would say, a couple of dozen LEED certified data centers in the world. In India, as of today, there is no LEED certified standalone data center. But out of the 77 certified LEED buildings and campuses, there are some which are IT parks which may have server rooms in them which are incidentally LEED. Now, I think the interesting thing is there's a lot of desire, I would say, within the building community for data centers. There should be a LEED for data centers. The only thing is it seems to be a little different from the general building LEED, for the simple reason that data centers consume massive amounts of energy, sometimes to the factor of 20 to 100 times of what a regular office building consumes. So what has happened in the last year is that LBNL has recommended a framework for a special LEED for data centers. They call it the environment performance criteria, where out of the 100 points available, 50 points are towards energy efficiency for the building. And hopefully, if USGBC accepts this proposal or tweaks it and then releases it to the world at large, we should hopefully have a LEED specific for data centers down the line. And I think at that point of time, a lot of Indian data centers should definitely look at it. The maximum number of clients that we have is in the telecom segment, because I think a lot of investment has happened in the segment because of the opening out that happened. And generally, SCHNABEL tends to play in data center projects which are of a certain volume and above. So we are viable as an independent, neutral, specialist consultant, typically in data centers which are 10,000 square feet of raised floor area and above. So we are currently working on a couple of projects with a telecom client where we are trying to do 2 sizable data centers for them. We have in the past engaged with other telecom companies as well. The other subset of the telco piece is the whole, co-location and IDC segment. And the highest square footage of data centers addressed by SCHNABEL is in this segment. Overall, out of the 890,000 square feet of data center built up area that we have addressed in the last 2 years that we've been in the country, about 55% comes from this IDC segment. The other very large segment that we work with is the banking sector. And there we have clients who are looking at either building new data center to augment capacity and simultaneously take the effort to put up a DR as well, or else people who have reasonably robust capacity available who are looking at a DR project. And those are the third type of customers that we work with. So I think telecom, more so than others, because they strongly believe that the standard came out of their industry body, which is the TIA, are very particular about compliance to the TIA 942 standard. So that is something that at least to SCHNABEL is a basic offering to not just telecom but every client, because that is the only definable standard available as of today, which looks at how data center spaces should be planned and designed. Banking clients, I have believed a lot of them, especially in the last year, in their desire to postpone the build of that next large facility, have actually evaluated co-location spaces and have looked at the 40 to 100 rack migration to a colo place rather than building their own site, which is very contrary to usual behavior from the banking segment. I'm expecting they will go back to building their own facilities in about, there are a couple of banks that are already doing it, but I think as a segment that they'll go back to original behavior very shortly.